Hello and welcome to another episode of the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And I'm Mike Varley, and this is week 24 of our marathon walking tour around the 5 boroughs of New York.
This week we walked around Manhattan. We're back in the city, and our theme, because now we're doing themes, was the music of Manhattan. And to talk about our theme, we had a very special guest on this week. His name is Tom Wolfson. He's a friend of ours. He's a musician. He knows a lot about the city. He knows a lot about music in general. Grew up in New York City. We call him a native New Yorker. And I don't want to say too much before we just get into it because we talked a lot about music. We really covered our route. We covered some of Tom's songs that represent New York City to him. And we talked about, why music relates to cities so much. And if you keep listening, you'll hear it all.
That's right. Yeah, we encourage you to listen. It was a great episode. We had a lot of fun with Tom. And we'll do a plug for his band at the beginning because we didn't do a plug for his band till the end of the podcast. So
good idea.
The band name that he is a part of is Sooner. They have 2 EPs out. They're going to release a full length very soon. And you can check out their Instagram at Sooner Sounds. But yeah, without further ado, let's go talk to Tom. It's funny, we're doing this walk, the theme, the music of Manhattan, and there's just so many songs about New York and Manhattan. You got to be a little selective, and honestly,
yeah.
We don't know anybody more selective than you. So,
guilty.
Yeah.
Yes, I am particular.
Yeah,
you could say.
Yeah.
It's a daunting thing to think about all of the music that's associated with New York because, New York is just one of the most, even though it's not actually one of the biggest cities in the world, it has, arguably the most cultural impact on the world of any city. So it stands to reason that there is just a whole, culture of music about New York.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to dissect.
Yeah. And this coming from a man who is from the area.
That's true.
Native just a few blocks up that a ways.
So I should get out of the way right now, kind of how I am a native New Yorker, because I'm going to be making a lot of statements, I imagine, hopefully not too many statements as a capital N native New Yorker.
Oh, yeah.
And I should qualify that.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in the suburbs,
Right.
and then I moved to Manhattan and went to high school in the city. And for a lot of native New Yorkers who are extremely gatekeepery about that moniker, that is not enough.
Right.
So for certain types of very snobby New Yorkers, I'm not a true native New Yorker because I didn't spend the entirety of my childhood. Although I would actually argue that I kind of did because my dad lived over there on 64th and Madison when I was a little kid before I actually full-time lived in the city. So I was always in the city as a kid and then went to high school here. So.
Yeah. I definitely think that counts.
Yeah.
We consider you native New Yorker.
I don't feel like a phony when people ask me where I grew up and I
Yeah.
say I grew up in New York City.
No.
Because I did.
You
Yeah.
did.
I
Yeah.
have formative experiences that took place in the island of Manhattan and 5 boroughs from when I was a very young child straight through
Yeah.
to college.
Yeah. I think it counts. And
Yeah.
the neuroses to prove it, really
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, and as far as actively trying to embody New York stereotypes, I have definitely, I think, proven myself aggressive in that endeavor.
You've definitely got that one down.
Yeah. I think so.
But you were telling us before we started about the idea of associating songs with cities.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to think about because, when we were talking about music of New York, I was trying to decide whether or not I would approach that from a really personal standpoint or from an official sort of standpoint,
Mm.
because
Right.
I think that there are sort of different prisms through which people associate particular types of music or art in general with certain places.
Right.
And like, you know, when it comes to, say, like New York, like it would be very easy for anyone who's never even been in New York to be like, oh, music that's associated with New York, Frank Sinatra, Lou Reed, you know, Simon and Garfunkel, like anybody could sort of list off the top of their head like that type of music.
Right.
And that's all valid, but I think that for me, the music that I associate with New York is kind of a combination of that and also what is very personal for me, some of which is music that maybe people wouldn't necessarily associate with New York, and it's just because I happened to have experiences, and then some that's sort of in between. But I think that it's interesting how people come to associate certain types of music with certain places or certain types of art with certain places, because it makes you think about like why that happens. And I think that it comes from a couple different places. Movies.
Sure.
I
Oh,
think
totally.
it's like hard to sort of overestimate how much certain types of music are associated with certain places because of movies. And then artists that are from there. And I think that
Yeah.
those are probably the two biggest ways in which people like associate like the first sort of category.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a personal experience, but just like, you know, Dr. John is New Orleans music. You know, the Beach Boys are California.
Yeah.
You know, Frank Sinatra is New York.
Right.
And so it's sort of interesting, like to kind of map out how that ends up happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think-
even the like my personal songs that either are on our route or that are not on our route, that are just like my New York songs, they make me feel like I'm in a movie.
Right.
Like if I'm walking, like I was listening to a sneak peek of what is on our route, but it's not really a location, so I feel like I can give it away. Back in the New York Groove. I was listening to that yesterday while we were walking, and I was like, oh yeah, I am back in the New York Groove. Like, this is great.
And there's totally a movie, I think it's Wanderlust, where there's like an establishing shot of New York. I think it's Wanderlust, where they're like entering New York and in the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're playing that, and it's
yeah.
like, come on,
It's
like,
amazing. And if
it's
you
a
have
totally
that-
New York moment.
It's
Right.
so good. And if
Yeah.
you have that like in your ears while you're on the subway or while you're like coming out of the Port Authority or something, like
Right.
you feel like all eyes are on you and like you have your own soundtrack. And I feel like, I don't know, that's how when I have the songs that are associated like personally, it's kind of as if they are in a movie. It's just a movie that no one has seen
And
except
it's
for me.
especially in a city like New York, which has been the set of so many movies.
Yeah.
It's very easy to feel like you're in a movie when you're walking around New York and listening to, you know, a particular piece of music and be like, I'm just in a Woody Allen movie right now, or
Right.
you know, I'm in When Harry Met Sally right now, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a romantic city in that way.
I think a minor interesting addendum to like how you associate music with locations is I think road trips often imprint, but that's not really a thing
Yeah.
for New York. You know, like you
Right.
probably flew here, or you're not driving a car around here most likely if you're visiting.
Yeah.
But you know, you can associate based on trips, but it's hard. I guess you could be listening to headphones while you're walking around.
It is interesting how
Yeah.
that happens though, because like I feel like, you know how people like associate smells tied to memory. You know, you'll like smell something, it'll give you like a sense memory of
Yeah.
something with your childhood. Everybody gets that. I also get the same thing with music, and this is a sort of an interesting thing. Like when that doesn't really happen anymore because of the way that we listen to music. Because like when I was a kid, I listened to CDs. So if I went on a trip, I was probably bringing 4 or 5 CDs with me,
Right.
and that was the only thing that I was listening to. And so that music would get imprinted onto a place. Like for
Totally.
example, I went to London with my family when I was in 7th grade, and I was listening to this album, Wake of the Flood by the Grateful Dead, like constantly throughout that trip, because it was one of like 3 CDs I had, and the other 2, I guess, weren't as interesting to me. And so I was just listening to that album over and over and over again. And now whenever I listen to certain songs from that record, I immediately think of like, I can like smell London.
Yeah.
But that album has nothing to do with London culturally. It's a Grateful Dead album.
Yeah.
And so it's weird how like that is also like a prism that people have these very deeply personal experiences. There are certain, it's funny because we're actually going to be, I'm going to be talking about Charlie Parker probably a lot today, but there's one Charlie Parker record that I brought with me on a trip to Disney World when I was like 12 or something.
Yeah.
And so like the most unjazzy, unsoulful place in the world. If I listen to certain Charlie Parker songs, I'm like right back in Orlando, Florida.
Oh my gosh.
It's so weird how that happens.
Yeah. But you really like Disney World. Do you think that's part of like why?
Not in front of the cameras.
I'm sorry. We can edit it out.
No. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's like a thing with my family. My sister's a huge Disney fanatic, Disney theme parks fanatic. And so we went to Disney a lot when I was a kid. And like, I do. I've been going there since I was a kid. So like, there's a nostalgia for me. I also think that like, people who are very cynical about Disney World tend to be people who've never been.
Mm-hmm. And certainly haven't been with like their Walkman and the Charlie Parker blasting through your eardrums, making it a much more elevated experience, I'm sure.
The only true way to experience Disney World is with jazz. You really don't get the full elegance of the Magic Kingdom unless you're like listening to some really intense hard bop, you know?
Just nodding.
They go hand in hand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
That's
totally
a pro
wild.
tip.
Yeah. Pro tip, go by yourself, wear headphones, don't talk to anyone, just listen to jazz on the rides. That's how the real Disney fans do it.
So we should talk about our route, kind of give you an idea. We sent you along the list. We're excited for some of the feedback we're going to get.
Yeah.
But we didn't really give you a sense of like why we picked those songs.
Okay.
And the audience doesn't know either. The reason we picked those songs in particular, one, we wanted to limit ourselves to Manhattan because this is actually the first of 3 music-themed walks. There's a Queens-themed music walk and a Brooklyn-themed music walk, which you'll just have to find out what they are.
Yeah.
Good, because then I sort of by accident didn't really include a lot of what I would consider to be non-Manhattan music. I did include some, but the overwhelming majority of it is Manhattan-ish.
Yeah. And we can talk about the non-ones too.
Sure.
But we also wanted to do songs that were spaced out enough around the island to capture a marathon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was kind of a little bit of, I'm not even really sure if we had any one song that we wanted to be on the walk. It was more just like, all right, let's start at the bottom of the island and like start working our way up the west side and down the east side, and then say, all right, we got a marathon.
And also like specifically songs that reference a place or a neighborhood or a street or something like that, as opposed to just like the vibe of New York or like the city itself or something like that. So,
and I think that I would normally kind of maybe even just out of staunch commitment to being contrarian would like disqualify certain songs like that. But for what you guys are doing, I think that that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because, and we may talk about this a little bit more later, I think that there are certain songs that maybe through no fault of their own, or I think very much through fault of their own, kind of are false anthems of New York because they try too hard to associate themselves with like a part of New York, and it's like, you don't own Washington Square Park.
Right.
Like, who do you think you are writing about that place? You think now just because you wrote that song about, the West Village, that now that's just going to be an anthem? Fuck you.
Right.
Well, we're definitely going to get to that song.
Yeah,
I want to hear that.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yes,
Oh,
of course.
yeah.
Just trying to make sure.
Yeah.
If you guys are going to lose your sponsors.
No, it's our own very.
It's a Blue podcast. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, and one last thing, we should thank our, I guess, outreach coordinator, Teresa.
Yeah.
Because we had, this list, and then she went ahead and reached out to different contacts that corresponded to the songs and got us a little bit more information.
Cool.
Yeah.
So-
So this
Very
week we
cool.
actually got to talk to 2 different people, which I guess I'll just say it now.
I think we should just start off with the first song,
Yeah.
which is "The Bridge" by Sonny Rollins.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I spoke on the phone with a guy named Jeff from the Sonny Rollins Bridge Project,
Wow.
which is a project that is looking to rename the Williamsburg Bridge the
That
Sonny
is-
Rollins Williamsburg Bridge.
That is the fucking coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Sonny Rollins is a goddamn legend, and that would make me so happy. I had no idea that was a thing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad we're saying it on camera right now, because we should definitely get more people to sign that petition and make that happen. But the story, I'm sure you know, but for anyone that
Actually,
doesn't
don't.
know.
I know that composition. I had no idea that it was about the Williamsburg Bridge.
Yeah, so the story of Sonny Rollins, The Bridge, is that he was really famous, getting really famous, really popular in the scene, and then felt like he was getting too popular, like quickly, and that his skills weren't really improving as much as he wanted them to. So he took a hiatus and was just practicing at home, and then couldn't practice at home because of neighbors, like being too loud for the neighbors. He lived down in the Lower East Side, so it was before the bridge, the Williamsburg Bridge, was as it is now. There used to be like little stairways in the middle to go up. So he would climb up those stairways, find a little hidden spot, and play the saxophone on the bridge. And no one knew that he was doing this. So for like a year and a half, I believe, he was just playing on the bridge.
Wow.
And he
Oh
was
my
this
God.
mystery man that was like playing this beautiful music. And then a reporter wrote something and it caught on, and he stopped doing it and went back out to perform in public, I think is how that, and then recorded that album.
Wow.
But that's the story of Sonny Rollins and the Williamsburg Bridge.
I had no idea any of that.
Isn't that amazing?
And I mean, talk about like cinematic New York iconography, like Sonny Rollins on the, like practicing saxophone on the Williamsburg Bridge. That's just like the
It's like
most
Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like the most like it's like almost too like iconic an
Yeah.
image
Yeah.
to exist.
Yeah.
Like imagine being a guy, like just by accident, like stumbling upon that, like, oh, gives me goosebumps.
I
Yeah.
know, right? It's like when like Yo-Yo Ma was performing, I think in Central Park like 10 years ago or something, and people were just like, I don't know who that is, but it's amazing. And
Yeah.
like, I imagine
It'd be
people
like
probably
seeing-
had the same experience.
It'd be like seeing like Paul McCartney busking in Liverpool or something,
Totally.
and just being like, oh my God, of course. I actually have I don't know if this is really relevant to what we're talking about, but I had sort of an experience like that once, which is that the first time I ever went to Chicago, I was in college and I went for a weekend. I went to college in Michigan, and so, we took a road trip to Chicago with my friend Yuri and my friend Scott, and we stayed at this hotel for like 2 nights. We got together with some of our friends. We went to some bars. It was really just like a real quick tour. And I was standing outside the hotel smoking a cigarette, and I looked down the block, and from like almost like a block and a half away, I just see this really tall man, and I immediately recognized him as Nels Cline, the lead guitarist for Wilco.
Oh, okay.
And I immediately was just like, that's Nels Cline. And Wilco is a band from Chicago. They're like associated with Chicago. They write songs about Chicago.
Right.
They're, very much a Chicago-y band. And then as he was walking towards me, I realized he was walking into the hotel that I was staying in.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I was
man.
just like, this is too weird. I go to Chicago one time and I run into one of the like maybe 5 musicians that I would associate with Chicago.
Right.
And so like I walked into the hotel and I was just like, excuse me, are you Nels Cline? And he was just like, yeah, I am. Because like he's, you know, a guitarist for a fairly famous band. This was also back in, you know, 2008 or something like that.
When they were at their peak.
Yeah, when they were at their peak. But like he had just kind of joined the band. He's not like a household name or anything like that. So he was super nice. And I was like, you know, we like chatted, we got in the elevator together, and he gets off the elevator and he goes, yeah, next time you come see a Wilco show, you know, come backstage. And I was just like, what does that mean as the doors are closing? Like, what are you talking about? Is that a standing invitation? And then he was gone. But yeah,
hilarious.
Talk about
amazing.
like musicians associated with cities. It was like, you know, if I had gone to New York for the first time and had bumped into Sonny Rollins
Totally.
practicing in the bridge.
And like,
It
I'm
was so
sure
bizarre.
that's happened because it's like a nice thing to walk over and yeah, amazing.
It's crazy.
And so that's how we enter Manhattan this week via the Williamsburg Bridge. And from there, we start going down. And we put together the playlist. I had honestly forgotten about this until we sent it to you, but we put it together according to how we traverse the route.
Got it.
So
it's in chronological, in geographical order.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next song is New York State of Mind by Billy Joel, which when we sent along the
Dive
playlist
right
to Tom, he went, oh, that's a pretty good list, except for Billy Joel, which is wonderful because I don't even necessarily know if I have a counterpoint for this. I'm just really excited for the point.
Right. All right. Well, I should preface this by saying that I, in general, am not a big fan of Billy Joel.
Sure.
I just don't care for his music. I believe I once said to a friend, and I think that this best exemplifies how I feel about him, that if his songs were to come alive one day, they would commit suicide. Or at least they should. So it's not so much that I dislike him as I have like active vitriolic disdain for everything he does and stands for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that song in particular, I really think embodies, you know, not trying to pussyfoot around here, but yeah, really embodies kind of everything I really dislike about him. I sort of mentioned earlier, like songs that seem like they're trying to be New York anthems.
Yeah.
That second only to maybe Empire State of Mind
Sure.
The
is, I think,
Alicia Keys,
Yeah.
Jay-Z, okay.
which is maybe the worst offender. And I actually don't mind the Alicia Keys Jay-Z song that much. It just seems like they knew as they were writing it that it was gonna be a New York anthem, that they were just like, it's like writing a Christmas song, you know? It's like, this is gonna be a hit and we're gonna make $1 million from this every time it's played at a Yankees game for the next 40 years.
Right.
Sure.
Well, the Yankees happened to win the World Series that year. It was very fortuitous for them.
Oh, right.
So they were playing it for all the highlights and everything as well.
Oh,
God,
right.
I forgot about that.
my gosh.
2009,
Yeah, that's true.
But
man.
yeah, New York State of Mind to me sounds like how non-New Yorkers imagine the elegance of New York.
Right.
It's like ordering a Manhattan at an Applebee's. It's something that like on the outside appears classy and elegant, but like is just so suburban. I don't know, and maybe this is just because I can't help viewing everything that Billy Joel does through like the prism of like Long Island New Yorkers. No offense.
No. That's what it is. He's the totem for the entire island.
Yeah.
And like, I don't tend to love Long Island in general, which is it's actually weird because I actually spent a lot of time on Long Island as a kid. because I had a lot of friends that lived there from like camp and stuff like that. And so I have a lot of good memories hanging out on Long Island.
Yeah.
But like mostly good memories of hanging out with my friends who were just like, I can't wait to get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just I really don't like that song.
Yeah.
Well, what is it like? Is it that he's also just like everything's like big and everything's like feels like theater, or like is it that
Yeah.
part of it too? Like it's the vibe of it's like very easy listening, I would say.
Yeah, and it's like he's trying to flex jazz muscles in the
Right,
songs
right.
in that song that like he hasn't earned.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a jazz composer. He doesn't make jazz songs, and he was like, it almost felt when you listen to that song, I can like picture him being like, I'm gonna write a jazz standard about New York because I'm Billy Joel, and God damn it, I can, and people will accept it. And in that sense, he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, that song is the like embodiment of New York. And you know, maybe who am I to say otherwise? I mean, I'm not a great songwriter, but that song, it feels phony to me. It feels desperate to prove its New Yorkiness.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I think that's a great review. I don't
agree.
know that I
Thank you.
necessarily have like. I personally don't have a feeling one way or the other on Billy Joel. He wrote Allentown, which is where I'm from,
Right.
which is a very depressing song and quite accurate to my experience growing up there.
And
like,
that song is a song that seems desperate to prove its Bruce Springsteeniness.
yeah, and he will
if you ask
never
me,
be Bruce Springsteen
that is
because
correct.
there's only one boss.
That is correct.
So-
And I should also say that as a Billy Joel hater, I am also a Bruce Springsteen
Very good.
lover.
Right.
Although I think that that's a false dichotomy because to compare the two is just a fool's errand. But
Yeah.
I know that people like sort of tend to mention them in the same breath because they both are like blue collar tri-state area name droppers.
Yeah.
But you know, Bruce Springsteen does it with like effortlessly and like with class and you know, poetry and Billy Joel is a hack. So
I feel like I have to say though, on my liked songs on my Spotify playlist, I do have Moving Out, Anthony's song.
Yeah.
Because I really like the way he goes, the heart attack.
You know, there are actually, if I'm being honest, there's like one or two Billy Joel songs that, like, if I hear them, I don't immediately, like, turn them off. And I hate myself when that happens.
Right.
But, like, you know, I don't think he's, like, the worst songwriter ever. It's just so much fun to hate him.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not that I think he's, like, the worst songwriter ever. Of course, there's, like, worse songwriters. But, like, he's a good enough songwriter that it matters to hate him.
That's
I guess.
good.
Oh,
I don't know.
that makes sense. Yeah,
I guess
that
that's the
totally makes
best
sense.
possible compliment I will ever
Yeah.
be able to give him.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
important to hate him.
I like that. I feel like I need to weigh in, otherwise I won't be let back into Long Island.
Okay. Yes,
so,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Please.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I met all of Mike's family, they were like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Allentown." And they're like Billy
Oh,
Joel
God, yeah.
song. You
Yeah.
must love Billy Joel. And I'm like,
I mean,
I don't really care one way or the other. I know the song you're referencing. It's clearly
Yeah.
you do, but yeah.
they're thick as thieves. They're thick as thieves on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Anybody who's going to give them some love, they'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing about Billy Joel is that, but also to like further expound upon it, you talk about the suburbanness.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really, there's a famous writer that wrote a small book about New York whose name is escaping me right now. It's pretty bad, but I'm gonna crib from him, where he talks about like the three different types of people that exist in New York, and there's the native New Yorker. There, and they each have like different functions with and then there's the person that comes here for, you know, to make it,
Right.
and they have like a vitality about them. And then there's the people that are the commuters, and that they each make a third of the story of the city. And yeah, the fact that the tri-state area pours in by the millions every day when it's not a pandemic,
Right.
and then goes back, and there's that kind of circulatory system to it, and Billy Joel is in many ways the heart of that circulatory system.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons that I thought when I associate this song, I don't know if I've ever put this song on and been like,
Right.
like I've never once. But
The skyline is coming over the LIE,
But like at the end of Yankee games, they listen to New York, New York because they have class.
Right.
And at the end of Mets games, it's New York State of Mind.
Oh, really? I
Oh,
didn't
it
even
is?
know that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Oh, I had
that's
no
honestly,
idea.
I have no problem with that.
That's so funny.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many Mets fans from Long Island,
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They're the Long Island Mets.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something about him that I can't listen to a bunch of his songs because they are overly precious or just kind of like I don't even know if they were intended for that audience as they were written, but they've become that,
Yeah.
and so it's difficult to consume them. But as far as like the anthemic song, that's the only thing that's on this list that even comes close to aspiring to that.
Sure.
And it mentions Chinatown, which is where we go next on the walk.
Right.
So
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
but obviously, I don't think there's a single person in Chinatown that even associates that song with anything.
Yeah.
It just happens to be what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that it's worth saying that I think that Billy Joel, I would imagine, I can't really speak with that much authority on like his whole career because I don't like his music, so I haven't really listened to it that much. I've just listened to it enough to have a baseline opinion. But it seems to me like that his music and his storytelling works best when he's operating from that perspective, from the perspective of like a commuter. I mean, his first record is literally called like Cold Spring Harbor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think
like
so.
that to me, I'm like, yes, that's your lane. Stay in that lane. That's you being genuine. You can speak to that experience of being like the guy who from the boring place where Oz is on the horizon.
Right.
But then I think like then he went to LA and like made a couple albums, and then that's like where he made Piano Man. And then he came back to New York. And I think when he made that transition and like Turnstiles, like that era,
Yeah.
that's when he was like, no, I'm a New Yorker. 52nd Street, I'm
Right.
holding a trumpet.
Right.
I'm doing Big Shot,
Right.
Fifth Avenue and Dom Perignon in your hand,
Yeah.
cocaine. I'm hard. I'm New York. And that's where it completely goes off the rails for me.
Right.
But like he kind of goes back into that lane a couple of times in his career, and I think when he does that, that's like I still don't like his melodies and stuff, and that's like whatever. I can't really fault somebody for writing melodies I don't like, but at least he's not being a phony
Right.
in those circumstances. So.
Nice. We should move along to the
Yeah.
next song.
Okay.
But I think
Fantastic,
we
though.
did good work. We did good Billy Joel work.
Yeah. I'm always happy to go to work on Billy Joel.
Yeah. So the next track actually can, I presume, can delve a little bit into your movie experience as well.
Okay.
Although neither of us have seen this movie, but People Who Died by the Jim Carroll Band, which the movie associated with that is the Basketball Diaries. Jim Carroll was the autobiographical main character that Leonardo DiCaprio played.
Right.
Which like I
Neither
said,
of us
neither of
have
us seen it, but
we
I
watched
presume
the
you have.
trailer yesterday.
I've
but-
seen it. I haven't seen it in a long time. I saw it. I remember it used to play on HBO when I was in high school, and I would watch little bits and pieces of it. I don't even know if I've seen it all the way through.
Yeah.
I just remember like the scenes of them like driving around like with the guy in the driver's seat like nodding off,
Yeah.
like
Right.
as they like fly down Bleecker Street or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't really remember it that well, and I don't know that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen to it.
The song I would recommend, and I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard it before. Does that make sense? I wouldn't be surprised if you have heard it before. It's
Okay.
it's kind of like a list song, whereas like he's just listing off people that died
Okay.
while he was
Yeah.
in this terrible state of his
Got
life.
it.
He basically grew up in uptown, like Inwood.
Right.
And when he was like 12 or 13, I think, got into drugs and started like going out and like stealing cars and like going to 53rd and 3rd to like prostitute himself, and just like really like got into this whole scene in New York. And then I think by 19 was clean, but during that whole time had kept really sharp diary.
Yeah.
He was also going to private school, I believe, and playing basketball.
Right.
And so that's why it ended up being called the Basketball Diaries. But it was basically just like his memoirs about like being a teen, and like having this really like tough teenage life in New York City.
Yeah.
Started a band,
and then
dated Patti Smith, did
Right.
everything, and then died in 2009. But yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean, we would have watched the movie had we enough time, but we
Sure,
we
I'd
didn't.
like to see it
And
at
I would
some
still
point,
like to see
but-
it.
Yeah, I think
but-
it's considered like a pretty great film.
Yeah.
I should go back and watch it.
Yeah.
But
And-
yeah, the song basically lists like, I guess because that was his life, he had all these friends that died at really young ages.
Right.
And it lists, like how that happened. And I don't know if they're all true or not, or some of
Right.
it might just kind of rhyme
Yeah.
for the
Interesting.
lyrics.
And relative to the walk itself, he references a friend that hung himself in the Tombs. And the Tombs is the Manhattan Detention Center, which is down by Columbus Park.
Yeah, yeah, by
Again, in
City
the
Hall.
Chinatown area in the City Hall.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, which apparently has been rebuilt 4 times. So the one that he was referencing doesn't even stand there anymore.
Right.
But
Right.
it's still
Right.
referred to as the Tombs, apparently.
Yeah. And to think about that and
Jeez.
walk through there, and then also even just to like walk through that section and actually pay attention to what's around, it's so bizarre.
Right.
There's the detention center, and then across the street, it's like a little side street, and it's every other is like a Thai restaurant, and then a bail bonds, and then a nail salon, and then
Yeah.
a bail bonds, and then a massage place, and a bail bonds, and like it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
And just like this little snippet into what someone might be dealing with one day, like
Yeah, no, it's such a weird area down there. I did jury duty down there once, and I remember like you don't really ever look at that area the same way again after going through the court system or some aspect
Right.
of the
Yeah.
criminal justice system there, because it's just like this thing that you pass and it's like, oh, these big beautiful like neo classical buildings and everything, and you're just like, right, this is the where the courts are and there's City Hall, and it's
Right.
just like a municipal area, and then you're like, actually it's like a really weird, dark, seedy
Yeah.
place where people go to suffer.
right. And they are these like beautiful buildings that are in kind of a touristy area. Like you
Right.
said, yeah, I've only done jury duty in Brooklyn, and like so those buildings still to me
Yeah,
are
same
just
kind
like,
of thing.
I'm sure no one goes in there.
Right.
It's just like there to represent the courts.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
no,
They
it's
almost seem more
it
like
is the courts.
monuments than buildings, because they
Yeah.
look like the monuments in DC.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
bizarre.
So from there, we go west and north a little bit, and we head over to the Village.
Mhm.
And the song that we chose was Positively 4th Street
Yeah.
by Bob Dylan. And there are so many songs. I think there is a website, in fact, that catalogs every reference Bob Dylan makes to a different part of New York City.
Right.
We chose that one for a couple reasons. And it's like, he's never been entirely clear on if Positively 4th Street is 4th Street.
Right.
That's what people assume. There's also a 4th Street in Hibbing, Minnesota, I think, or where he
Oh.
went
Yeah.
to college, and it could be there.
Well, also, I don't even know if when he did Blonde on, because that's on Blonde, right?
It is,
No, it's
it
the-
is a single from Highway 61 Revisited.
Right,
so it's,
right.
it's in that era.
But
Yeah.
after he went electric,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if he was still living in New York when that happened, because I thought of that song too, and like Bob Dylan in general when I was making my playlist, and I was like, but I don't really associate that song with the period of Bob Dylan's life that's associated with New York. But also because he's Bob Dylan, like you can associate any of his music with New York, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if Bob Dylan's not a New York musician, then who is?
Right. For me, I think he is trashing some unnamed person.
Right.
Saying, as he is trying to escape his folk era
Yeah.
and go somewhere else. And I guess there's something about that sentiment, the idea of like, fuck you, I am, trying to do something with my life, and I'm not gonna deal with the haters. That seems quintessentially New York.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
So,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And that specifically, that little area, that little neighborhood right there.
Yeah, and
I
maybe
feel like,
I didn't even think about this, and maybe we're kind of going off the rails, imprinting our own projections on Bob Dylan lyrics, which I guess is the only thing you
that's
can
part
do.
of, that's what you do with
it's a
folk
vessel.
music. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. But like, it makes you think of like maybe he was writing that to the New York folk scene after so many of those people like rejected him for
Totally.
branching out.
Yeah, maybe.
So in a sense, I guess maybe it is like a retrospective song about New York in like a
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I always thought about
Yeah.
it. And it's also
That's as valid an interpretation as you can have for a Bob Dylan song.
pretty concrete
Yeah.
on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But it also just blatantly lists a street, which was
Right.
useful
Right.
for trying to construct a
For
wall.
But only in the title.
Yeah,
There-
yeah,
I
no,
don't
it doesn't
think
reference
Yeah.
it at
he
all.
doesn't.
otherwise.
He doesn't reference anything in about New York. I think in the lyrics.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just
But,
trashing people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we walked through there yesterday for our 360 footage and passed by the Minetta Tavern and Cafe Wa and the Blue
Yeah.
Note and stuff like that. And I mean it's kind of vacant right now, but you can still feel, I don't know, I feel the history of that area.
It's funny because I intentionally or unintentionally, I didn't put any early '60s New York folk on my playlist, and then I like finished my playlist and I was like, oh, I forgot Simon and Garfunkel and all of that, and then I thought about it and I realized that for some reason I don't really associate that music with New York. I love all of that music,
Yeah.
but like to me, even though I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would really disagree with me, I feel like that music isn't really truly like New York music because like that happened at such a specific time for such a short period of time. And like it was basically just, and it's music with a rural tradition
Right.
that like for this brief like 5 to 10 year period happened to find a home in New York. And then like, I mean, obviously there's still like a little bit of a folk tradition in the village. I guess that continued through the 80s, and I have somebody on my playlist that sort of embodies like the later stages of that. But like, I don't know, even when I listen to like Simon and Garfunkel, like the most like New Yorky folk, The Boxer or 59th Street Bridge song or any of
Yeah.
those songs, like I love those songs, but like it doesn't make me think of New York for some
Yeah.
reason. It
That's interesting.
doesn't make me feel like I'm in a movie about New York when I'm walking through New York and I'm listening to Simon and Garfunkel.
That's funny.
It almost, I feel like, to me, a lot of that, like what was happening then is people coming in and like meeting here and like
Right.
spending some time here to create something, which
Totally.
I think is the experience of a lot of people that
Yeah,
are
that's a really good
here.
point.
But I get what you're saying, and I feel like when we walk through that little area there where like all these things happened, I do feel the history and I do feel the energy, but I also feel like, wow, we're really trying to keep this
Yeah.
alive, and it's not anymore. Like that was just a brief moment of time. It's not probably going to happen
And
again.
I think that this is something that's really a very, for me, personal thing. I think that
Yeah.
for most people, when they listen to that, or for a lot of people, when they listen to that music, it is very steeped in like New York imagery, and I almost kind of like envy that. And it totally makes sense to like, I do like officially think of it as New York music. It's
Yeah.
just like for me personally, the two don't like connect.
Yeah,
And
I
on
think
that
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess it actually, I think this kind of brings us into our next song actually
Okay.
too, because the next song on our list is Chelsea Morning by
Oh,
Joni
yeah.
Mitchell. And I mean, for me, that's very much a personal New York song
Yeah.
because I listened to that. It's on Blue, right? I listened to that album.
No, it's
no,
not
it's
on
not.
I don't think it's actually, I think it's on her second record, or it was a single.
Oh, was it?
It's definitely sung to a Siegel era.
Okay. Well, I remember listening to Blue and then also listening to that song and maybe whatever album that's on a lot when I first moved to New York.
Yeah.
And I was living
Is it on
in the
Blue?
East Village,
It's not
and
on
I'd
Blue.
like walk
I don't know what
over
it's
to
on.
Chelsea.
I just read it yesterday. That's the only reason I know.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I believe you. I mean, it's too happy to be. It's like so.
Right.
It makes me happy. at
She
least.
referenced it as she thinks of it as one of her earlier works, and she said it was like her ingenue period.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
And yeah, I mean, she was actually
Her rebuffing David Crosby period.
yeah. Yeah.
Actually, you could probably describe her entire career. But
And I'm by no means a Joni Mitchell expert. I just happened to do research relative to this song. But that she was the third person to perform the song. It was Fairport Convention's debut album, and then I think
she
Judy Collins did it,
Yeah,
and then
then
she
she
did
did
it.
it.
So
Wow.
I don't really know how much of her career was songwriting before she herself became a performer. But this was an instance. Obviously, in that era, everybody was writing songs for everybody. So,
right.
Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we've been listening to it, and it's bright and optimistic.
It's
And,
like one of the most beautiful songs ever written. I actually have a different Joni Mitchell song
Yeah.
on my list.
Yeah, you should talk
but
about
from
it
a
now.
completely different era.
Right.
So this also just happens to be one of my all-time favorite songs. Period. But "Song for Sharon."
Yeah.
Which I include it because I actually. So in the song, she mentions taking the Staten Island ferry to Staten Island to buy a mandolin. It's like the first stanza. And I include that because I love that song so much that I literally did that. What she's talking about in the song, there's a store in Staten Island called Mandolin Brothers that is legendary. I mean, it is one of the greatest string instrument stores in America. And it's in this weird part of Staten Island that you would never otherwise go to. I mean, like, I don't know if there are unweird parts of Staten Island that you would want to go to, but you guys could speak to that more than I can.
We went all over it.
Yeah.
It's weird and fantastic.
But I literally was just like, I need to recreate this experience because there was a point in my life where I decided I wanted to buy a mandolin and learn how to play mandolin. This is before I realized that my fingers are way too sausagey for me to play a mandolin, and I failed in that endeavor. But I had a car at the time, and I could have driven to Staten Island to go to this store, and I was living in Brooklyn and decided, no, I'm going to do what she did. And I took the subway into Manhattan, got on the Staten Island ferry, and took it to Staten Island, and then took like 3 buses and walked 15 minutes to get to this mandolin store. And walked in, and there was nobody in the store. It was like in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, and there was a guy that was working the store who was just like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, is this really the store with Joni Mitchell?" And the guy's like, "Come here."
Oh, you're
And it was this like old guy, and it turned out he's been running the store for like 50 years, and he was like, he like pulls out like a big scrapbook, and just proceeds to show like pictures of him with like every great singer-songwriter. He's like, "Yeah, here's the picture of me and Joni when she bought the mandolin, and then she wrote that song about it." Or actually, I think what happened, this is going to sound like I'm making this up, but I think I walked into the store, and he was just like working, and I picked up a guitar and I started playing Coyote, which is a Joni Mitchell song from the same record. And then I think he came over and he was like, "So, you're
You're
here.
here for the scrapbook, aren't you?"
Yeah. And I was just like, "Is there really, do you have evidence?" And he was like, yeah. Come here. And it was incredibly cool, and also incredibly shrewd, because then he managed to upsell me to like a $350 Gibson mandolin that I was just like, yes, of course I'm gonna buy this.
Right.
It's a totally necessary purchase.
Yeah.
And then I played it for like 6 months and sold it to a friend.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, a great song. And other than Wu-Tang, the best musical reference to Staten Island.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I can't challenge you on that. I can't think of anything offhand that's Staten Island related that is Wu-Tang.
We don't have a Staten Island walk, so we haven't done the research. But
Staten Island musical walk.
we've done.
Actually,
no,
while we were in Staten Island, though, we did visit the Wu-Tang street.
Oh,
There is
really?
and there's a mural
lot.
there, and we
There's
took
a
pictures.
lot
Of course.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, way to go, Wu-Tang Clan, for like making Staten Island seem at all cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like, I mean, also their music's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have Wu-Tang on my, I have Old Dirty Bastard on my
Mhm.
on my
Yeah.
playlist, but no formal Wu-Tang. But like, yeah, you know, what can you say? They're fucking Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They are. No, that's insulting. I was going to say they are to Wu-Tang, or they are to Staten Island what Billy Joel is to Long Island, but that's like an insult to Wu-Tang.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, especially after that rant we just heard
Right.
about Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're cool about it.
Yeah.
They're the opposite thing. They're like Long Island is almost like too cool for Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Wu-Tang Clan is like too cool for Staten Island. They like don't deserve them.
That's hilarious. So yeah, one thing that actually wasn't on the list as far as the progression of the walk, but thanks to Teresa, we incorporated into the walk was Tin Pan Alley,
Yeah.
which Jesse managed to talk to somebody about that topic as well.
Yeah, I talked to a woman named Michelle from the Historical Districts Council, I hope I'm getting that right,
Yeah.
about, I guess what they do, that organization, is they go around and landmark different locations in the city.
Uh-huh.
And there's 5 buildings on 28th Street between Broadway and 6th that were part of Tin Pan Alley that like basically just are like falling apart.
Right.
Like there's basically
Yeah.
like a slumlord in charge of those buildings, and there's been people trying to knock them down and develop it. And this group, HDC, they worked to actually get those buildings landmarked.
Right.
So now they can't be destroyed.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, and that's great. And I really didn't know much about the history of Tin Pan Alley, but I guess just like that one little area, there was a period of time in like the early 1900s, am I getting
Yeah.
that right? Where just like a
vaudeville.
ton of music was created. Like Take Me Out to the Ball Game was like the number one song. I did not put that on our playlist. I put a different song.
I mean, that's basically like the birthplace of musical comedy, with,
Yeah.
musical theater, all happened there. And I was trying to decide what musical theater to put on my list because I am also somewhat embarrassingly like a big musical theater fan. But I eventually decided that like most of my favorite musical theater is not the musical theater that's about New York. And so I just didn't really put any on. Or those Tin Pan Alley songs.
Yeah.
My favorite versions of them are when they were interpreted by jazz musicians. And so I used those versions.
Yeah.
And they're like double, triple New York songs.
Yeah, it's a
You
whole
know?
layering system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just realized now that we're talking about Tin Pan Alley that there's like a whole like chunk of New York music that I didn't even consider when I was making my list, which is like Brill Building, music, Lieber and Stoller and all of that. You guys
Which
know
we're
about
gonna, honestly, let's roll in and reference those too, so we can get
Cool.
to your list. But both on Broadway and Spanish Harlem.
Yeah.
On Broadway, the George Benson version we did, but I think the original is the Drifters.
Yeah.
And Lieber and Stoller, and then Spanish Harlem, Benny King.
Right.
And Phil Spector is involved to some capacity to that
Right,
as well.
right.
Which I honestly didn't know a lot about that until I was researching these songs. But yeah, so you might know more about Lieber and Stoller than we do. But
I mean, I wish I knew more actually, I should have like read their whole Wikipedia page so that I could seem like an expert on it. But I mean, I know that they like sort of ghost wrote a lot of the early days of rock and roll.
like Hound Dog and
They wrote Hound Dog but like they also kind of didn't, because like they didn't invent rock and roll.
Right.
Like people of color invented rock and roll, and then they like saw that and like filtered it through like a white, assembly line system of like adapting, R&B and like jump blues for white consumption.
Yeah.
So it's sort of interesting to think of like the revisionist history, because like there are people out there who are like, no, like Lieber and Stoller didn't, like, Chuck Berry didn't invent rock and roll, Lieber and Stoller did. And it's like, that's kind of a revisionist. You can sort of choose your own adventure here based on how you define American race politics.
Right.
Right.
Well, also, I'm pretty sure it was Michael J. Fox.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep, good old Marty McFly.
Jesse hadn't seen any of those. We just watched them
like a week
for the
ago.
first
That's why
time.
it's like quick.
Yeah, it's funny because I listened to a podcast, and you guys are probably going to end up editing this out, but there's a podcast that I listened to called Blank Check that I was actually listening to while I was walking over here, and they're doing Robert Zemeckis right now. Yeah. And they, like, all three of them are just, like, huge Back to the Future fanboys, and then they kind of make a bit out of their, like, Back to the Future is, like, one of the greatest movies ever, except for him inventing rock and roll. Like, it's like a whole bit, and they're like, yes, but, like, obviously one of the best movies ever made, except for him inventing rock and roll, which is deeply problematic. Like, Marty, white guy did not teach, Marvin Berry, Chuck Berry's cousin, how to play rock and roll. It's like, yeah, I never even thought about it, but like that is kind of an insulting bit in that movie.
Yeah. They should. It's almost like they should have gone into the future and realized that that was not going to work.
Yeah, it doesn't super scan nowadays.
So George Benson was the next one. George Benson rendition of On Broadway.
Yeah.
And then we go to Across 110th Street, which, I mean, honestly, I think of the Jackie Brown at the conclusion of that movie. But, I mean, you grew up around that area, so I don't know. Did you have
I'm pretty sure that song is referencing the east side of 110th Street.
Is it the east side? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the 100. So where I was living when I was in high school was 110th and Broadway.
Yeah.
Or 106th and Broadway.
Yeah.
And that area, I don't think is where any R&B songs are being written about that area, because that's Columbia.
Right.
That's like a pretty, I mean, it's changed a lot.
But I was thinking about Morningside Park, too. I mean,
Yeah,
I honestly don't know which side it's
I actually don't know. I'm not sure. Because, Morningside Park was pretty rough back in the day. It's not anymore, really. But, like, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Of course,
investigate that.
Yeah, I mean, we
because I remember, like, when I went to high school, when we first moved to Manhattan, I lived on 106 between Broadway and Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And Broadway was Columbia University, and it was like very safe, and there's nothing to worry about. But it was like a thing where it was like stay off of Amsterdam at night. Yeah. Because even then, in 2004, 2003, like Amsterdam was still kind of dicey. And I remember, as a teenager, like seeing, drug dealers and stuff on the corners and sex workers and stuff, and being like, wow, this is really New York. This is this is really, this is not the Upper East Side, and that has completely changed. That's all gone now.
Yeah.
But like back in the 80s and like during the crack epidemic, and I think even way before that. Morningside Park was like one of the most dangerous places to be in New York City. Yeah. So maybe it is about that.
I wouldn't be surprised if your instinct is right. I mean, I didn't see anything specifically about East or West Side.
I just know that like 110th and Park is like a thing. It's like that area is like a thing.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's the only reason why it makes me think of that it's probably the east side, but I know that Harlem starts a lot further south on the east side than it does on the west side.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things, I feel like that transitions into another one of the songs, which is 53rd and 3rd by the Ramones, which is
a Ramones song I don't know, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a Ramones song.
Yeah.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
It's not a ballad.
My Ramones appreciation pretty much begins and ends with Rocket to Russia.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you had Ramones on your list too, Rockaway Beach. I love that song.
It's on Rocket to Russia.
It's such a good one.
Yeah. And I love that record, and I kind of love the Ramones in the way like people love bands that they listened to when they were teenagers.
I mean, they're a quintessential teenage band.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so good.
I don't know if have you ever seen Rock and Roll High School by any chance?
No, and it's funny that I've never seen it because I was gifted the DVD of Rock and Roll High School when I was like 13 or something. I think
Yeah.
like my mom got it for me.
Yeah.
And I remember just never wanting to watch it.
Yeah.
Never. I was like, even as a 13-year-old, I was just like, I can tell that this is probably a pretty boring, weird movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'm as I gather, I'm right.
I have a totally skewed perspective on it for this reason. Recently, I made a feature-length film that was just ripping every single, like there's no original content. It's all ripping from various cultural things. And I made these songs and then made essentially music videos / scenes to each one of the songs. And the final song of National Lampoon's Global Staycation, which is the name of the thing, it takes Rock and Roll High School from 1979 and Rock and Roll High School from 1991, which stars Corey Feldman, and smashes the two of them together. There's one character that's the same. And her name is like Professor Vader. It's like it's so absurd.
Yeah.
But
We'll put a link.
yeah, we'll put a link to it.
Yeah.
But I could say that the 79 version is quantum leaps better than the Corey Feldman version, which probably matches up.
It always seemed to me like Rock and Roll High School was like a cheap knockoff of a bad National Lampoon movie.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like it's not like a cheap knockoff of Animal House.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like a cheap knockoff of Caddyshack 2.
Right.
So I don't know. I've never seen it, so
yeah.
I really shouldn't. I should really shut my mouth.
Yeah.
I know that for a lot of people, it's like a classic.
It's like, I'm not even sure if it's classic or not. I enjoyed it, but the way that I watched it was literally like, stop, play. What do I like? Chop. I haven't actually watched it as
You
just
were
a piece
watching
of
it
film.
to like gather nuts and berries from.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to where we were, like 53rd and 3rd, which I didn't really know until we were doing the research for this, and it comes up again through the Jim Carroll Band because he was prostituting himself at 53rd and 3rd. I mean, it was a cruising spot back before it is now very much not.
It's so
Right.
There's
so
three banks
bizarre
on
to
that
think
corner.
about that.
Yeah.
We just walked through it on our way over here, and we're like, where could any of this have even had? It's like fully just concrete, big buildings.
Yep.
There's not even like a single doorway that you could like hide in, or
Yeah.
like small alleys or anything like that. Like it must have just
It's like
changed
Sutton
so
Place
much.
over there. It's like
Yeah.
It's Sutton Place. I guess starts further north, but
Oh,
it's
I don't know if it technically is, but it's right
but it's like
there.
that kind.
Yeah.
It's like residential.
It's
It's like old people live around there. You know, I'm trying.
And like
I haven't been in
massive
that
bank
area in so long.
buildings, and there's a big Starbucks.
It's so weird. I have like vague memories of what Midtown was like in the 90s.
Yeah.
Which was like the tail end of Midtown being a rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
And like I remember, because both my parents worked in the garment center when I was a kid, and so I actually spent a lot of time in Midtown, in around the 40s and 7th Avenue and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember being like a little kid and being near Times Square, and this may have even been just after Disney started to turn 42nd Street around, but there just being porn theaters everywhere.
Right.
I mean, everywhere. I asked my dad once, like, what was New York like in the 70s and the 80s? And he just told me, like, you know what New York was like? I was walking through Grand Central Station at 5 o'clock on like a weekday, and I was coming off the train, like entering the city, and I see like a sex worker talking to like a John, like in the middle of the main area of Grand Central Station, like near the information booth. And I see her just go like, oh, hang on one second, squat down, pull down her underwear, and take a piss right in the middle of Grand Central. That's what New York was like in the 70s.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
So, I mean,
Wow.
I don't know if that story's true or not, but
Yeah.
that's what he told me.
I guess that's why, like, if you're a true New Yorker, you're not like looking up at this beautiful ceiling in Grand Central. You're like, I'm gonna just keep moving.
Well, I mean, now I do,
No, I'm
because it is, you know.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
fucking around, but
Well, yeah, no, it's totally. I mean,
Yeah.
there are. I mean, I you know, I can't tell you like how many like, you know, family, friends, people who were here for the thick of it, who are just like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
It was
So
just
wild.
The opposite of what it is now.
yeah.
This is the only reason I'm bringing this up because it is super relevant. This week, I was at Myrtle and Bushwick Avenue.
Yeah.
Turned the corner talking to my sister on the phone, and there was a woman who was like 3/4 standing like this, just pissing right up against one of those green billboards. And we like made very solid eye contact.
Yeah.
And I just kept talking to my sister as I was on the phone and
Yeah.
just kept walking.
Yep.
So, I mean, not Grand Central, you know,
No,
not a
right.
commuter.
It's
But,
moved.
you know, there was literally a corner 2 feet further.
I feel like
You
Myrtle
could've done that.
Broadway, it's like that area specifically is like a monument.
Yeah, that's right. The
to,
dream
like-
is alive.
Yeah. It's like there's like a bubble,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, where it's like New York will always be New York right here.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I think more people die crossing the street at Myrtle Broadway than anywhere else in the city. It's like the most, like,
Really?
statistically,
Damn.
like the most
oh,
dangerous.
watch out. That's
Yeah.
where my
street to
studio
cross.
is now.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
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 Because it's just because like there's, you know, traffic nightmare.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's also just a lot of people like crossing the street while sleeping.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense.
We also we sent along this a list to you that actually had a different Gil Scott-Heron song than what was on there originally.
Yeah.
We
yeah,
had
originally it was Madison Avenue, but they actually don't have that song on Spotify, so I couldn't put it on the list.
and it's
It's too bad.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's a very like railing against consumerism
Right.
type song, which yeah, it's fun, and also like you go to Madison Avenue and it's like this is where all the creation happens that like
Right.
you know impacts the rest of the world, not just New York, and
Yeah.
it's so I don't know. We've walked up and down there a few times now. This is our
On Madison?
Yeah, this is our second tour of Manhattan. We were here back in August, and you know went to different boroughs, and now we're back again. And yeah, there's something about particularly that Midtown section of Madison Avenue, which just it's foreign, or I don't know.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's just
It's weird, and I know
Yeah.
that, and it's very weird for me actually, because that's where my dad lived when I was a kid.
Oh.
It was
Yeah.
where my grandfather lived. My dad was living with my grandfather for a
Yeah.
time when I was growing up, and so I was spending every weekend on Madison and 64th
Yeah.
as a kid, and which is further north, and that's more kind of where it becomes more residential / fashion. But like, you know, that whole stretch of Madison is that, I mean, that whole area, Midtown East, from like, you know, 59th to 34th, you know, like east of Lex, is such a bizarre part of New York City.
Yeah,
it's
it's
so
very, like,
relentlessly curated
wide.
and
Yeah.
wide. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it like feels like there's so much space, but it's like not really usable space. It's all just
Right.
kind of like
It almost feels like
Stretched
it's
out
too
or
expensive
something.
for itself.
Right.
yeah,
You know?
maybe
It's like
Maybe
not
that's
New
it,
York
yeah.
can't even afford to live in that area,
Yeah.
and it's just like we've just given up. It's
Yeah.
just too expensive.
Yeah.
There's just nothing like, you know, it's just office buildings
Yeah.
and like, you know, bagel
salons
places.
and
But
stuff.
yeah.
I met one of my first jobs in New York, my freshman year of college, was to work on Sundays as a coat girl at a hair salon on Madison and 60th, I think.
Uh-huh.
And it was so bizarre. It was over the summer, so like no one was wearing coats, but people would like
Right.
bring me their like small dog to like hold in the coat closet and then give me like a $40 tip. And like,
Wow.
it was like great. It was a great job. It was a fantastic job.
That sounds awesome.
But it was also super bizarre.
Yeah, God, I can't even imagine.
We have a couple more songs left on the list, but
Yeah.
I want to tackle your stuff now because
Okay.
people can go on the YouTube and we'll leave a link for I guess both lists. You know, if you'd
Yeah.
like to give us your list as well, you're
Sure.
going to go over. But yeah, tell us a little
Okay.
bit. Give us your high notes.
Sure. All right. So, first song on the list, and it's these first two songs on the list are to me kind of like two sides of the same coin, but like just totally capture like to me, when I think of the sound of New York, one of them is kind of Ken Burns' fault. But the other one is just totally organically, the Ornithology by Charlie Parker. And to me, like, I don't think I'll ever associate any single artist with New York more than like Charlie Parker.
No.
It's just, that's like an end of discussion, case closed thing for me personally, because I just think it is everything that New York aspires to be. Cool, elegant, and sophisticated, while also like raw and gritty. Like, it's all of those things combined seamlessly. Also, just like, he's the greatest. He is the greatest
I mean, he's
that
Disney,
there
folks.
ever was.
I mean-
Yeah. And like, New York is the greatest city in the world. You know, it's like, if New York's the greatest city in the world, then it must have created the greatest musician to have ever lived. And who's the greatest musician to have ever lived? Charlie Parker. Like, that's just a fact.
Right.
But yeah, Ornithology to me, that just sounds, it's so effortless, it's so classy, but it also, it moves with like a New York kind of pace, and it just instantly, talk about like cinematic. Like, if I walk down 6th Avenue and put on Ornithology, I'm in a movie. You know, it's like, you just feel like you're in some like classic, you know, Woody Allen movie or something like that.
Yeah.
I listened to it while cooking dinner the other night after you sent it, and
yeah.
I was in a movie.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just a chicken.
Yeah. It's an amazing composition, and that recording of it is the definitive recording of it. So the other song, which is also a Dizzy Gillespie composition, but is, you know, they're more or less kind of the same band. And I'm sure it's Charlie Parker who's playing alto sax on it, is Salt Peanuts. And that is sort of like the other side of the coin, because it's frantic and it's frenetic and it's, you know, super high energy, so it has like that subway energy. But the reason why I say it's partly Ken Burns' fault is because, like, in classic Ken Burns style, there's like this incredible anecdote about Salt Peanuts in the documentary about jazz that he made, which is that it's this Salt Peanuts is like arguably like the first big bebop hit that was like on the radio. It was kind of the nascent like moment of bebop, which was such a huge shift for jazz. And like, I think of New York jazz, I think of bebop, because like New York doesn't own jazz, obviously. Like, New Orleans is as much a claim to owning jazz as like Chicago is, as, you know, Los Angeles has its own, you know, thing.
Kansas City,
Kansas City, yeah. All kinds of places kind of claim jazz, but I think that New York can claim bebop, which and it's the most New York style of jazz, because, like, you know, bebop was the moment where jazz kind of stopped being music that you danced to and became music that you thought about, which is a very New York approach to jazz. You know, you can't really dance. That's like the whole thing with bebop. You don't go in a dance hall and, you know, dance to it. It's not really popular music. You go to a club and you sit down and you shut the fuck up and you listen to the intellectual gods, like, who have blessed you with the experience to peep at their genius,
Right.
You know, which is so New York. But like, there's the anecdote is this, that song was a hit in 1946, and there's a story about a GI who's like retelling, like, he was like, I was on a carrier coming back from Europe, and we had just won the war. And I was so excited to be coming home to America after this horrific, you know, traumatic experience that we'd all gone through together. We'd been on the ocean for a couple of days, and then we pull into New York Harbor and we slowly start to pick up the radio frequencies of, you know, American radio stations. And the first thing I heard was this song that was just from Mars, and it was like the sound of like that I had never heard before, and was frantic and frenetic and celebratory and joyous, and it just sounded like America celebrating winning World War II as you enter New York Harbor, and like
Wow.
I know that that's like so maudlin and like so like cheesy.
Who was the actor that was saying it? Was
Right,
it Tom
yeah.
Hanks? Was it?
No, I think that it was actually a real interview that they were
Yeah.
like cutting back and forth to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
guy, but I can't remember. But it's just like the perfect image of like New York in 1946. We just won the
Yeah.
war, and it's salt peanuts. You know,
Right.
you know, and it's to me that just like instantly makes me think of like this the energy that people think of when they think of New York. You know,
Yeah.
the like subway cars speeding past you, and the high frequency, rapid fire sort of New York imagery.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the big two
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Those are the two that really feel like just the official anthems of New York, effortlessly. Weren't trying to be, just happened to be.
Right.
But I have a lot of that period of music. I also have West End Blues is the next one on my list, which is a seminal moment. Louis Armstrong. This predates bebop, but it was an instant sensation when that recording came out, because it was the sort of fanfare that Louis Armstrong does at the beginning of it was like something that nobody had ever really heard before, and then is also just he recorded it pretty soon after he moved to New York from Chicago, if I'm getting my history right, and is just a sort of like Louis Armstrong's arrival on the scene in New York, which is really like the start of true New York jazz history. Rhapsody in Blue. We got to talk about Rhapsody in Blue.
Sure.
Because this is one that kind of, I can't decide if it's too obvious.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. It really straddles the line.
Yeah. And I was almost hesitant to put it on there, because I'm like, ooh, is Rhapsody in Blue like too like iconic New York? I mean, it's like in, that's like the Disney version of New York
Right.
is scored to Rhapsody in Blue.
Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, it's rap. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, it's also the most Jewish. I think that like Rhapsody in Blue is the most well-rounded piece of New York music, because like it pulls from every piece of New York culture. You've got that incredible, clarinet solo at the beginning,
Yeah.
which is just like pure Jewish, musical tradition. And then obviously it's a classical piece, so you've got the Upper East Side crowd, and then there's jazz, and there's, moments of frantic, subway energy, and then there's like beautiful pastoral, Central Park theming, and like I don't even know if Gershwin meant to have it like be about New York, but it just seems like it is,
Right.
without having a single word.
Right.
It's just all musical, but it just sounds like New York.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be something that stands the test of time. Like, it's not like people are going to be like, this is too schmaltzy. If anything, it's just going to, I don't know. I think it may like edify further, like kind of get more concrete, but it's also kind of there already. Like it's not, it doesn't have the same type of like vibrancy that a bebop might have. But like
Right.
I don't know if it was ever built to have that from the beginning. So
Yeah.
I agree. It makes sense to have it on there for
Yeah.
sure.
And I think the kind of the other side of the coin, which I think that this does lean more towards, and I included it on purpose to sort of be a counterpoint to Rhapsody in Blue, is the prologue from West Side Story. And also because I was like, I gotta put some musical theater in
Right.
there.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to put a song from West Side Story in there because it's too complicated to explain. I have very mixed feelings
You
about
want
West Side
Officer
Story.
Krupke on your playlist?
Right? Well, I think that a part of me struggles to take West Side Story seriously, because like on the one hand, like the music is so good.
Yeah.
But the actor performances are always just inherently so phony.
Sure.
You know? And so like I love Cool, like the song Cool, but like when I hear musical theater singers sing it, even in the original Broadway cast recording, I'm just like, you're not that cool. And so that's why I did the prologue, because it's just Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's just pure Leonard Bernstein doing his thing, and that it sounds like New York to me.
Well, I think also, like, if you haven't seen it for a while, like, I never saw it performed live. I saw the movie, of course, but, like, just seeing, like, oh, something from West Side Story, like, that's appropriate.
Yeah.
And I, like, remember all the good, like, all the things that really do relate to New York, but I don't have to, like, experience what you're, like, the cheesy part that you're talking about.
Zim, zam!
Yeah.
Where are we going? We're going downtown, bim, boom! You know, like, they couldn't curse. It's just like, the whole thing is just like this bizarre fake swearing.
Yeah.
Go cheese it off.
Yeah.
Action. Some shit like that.
Yeah.
I really want somebody to mount a production of West Side Story where they just replace all the fake cursing with real cursing. So it's just like, hey, action, get the fuck over here.
My
and
God.
tell Tony to go fuck himself.
Have, like, Robert De Niro and
cool,
that other
boys.
guy do it. What's the other guy that plays with Robert De Niro all
like
the time?
Al Pacino
or the other guy. Sorry,
Joe
this is-
Pesci.
Yeah,
Joe
That's who I want to have
and Robert
do
De
it.
Niro doing Fosse. That would be so good. They could get Martin Scorsese to de-age them.
Yes.
Like in
Like in that last one.
Just do the whole thing mocap.
Oh my gosh.
But it's still it's still De Niro unable to like move his body, so it's like, oh yeah, you're 30, okay, I believe that.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
Get Benicio del Toro to play all of the Latino characters. He just like Tyler Perry's it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about your music, but but before we do that, if you were to pick one
Burning
song,
Desire.
Well, if you were to pick one song, let's say that you were going to walk around the streets of New York with, that we haven't covered already, what would be like kind of the cinematic song
that
you would recommend for people?
Question. That is a really good question. I guess I would have to go with Flamenco Sketches, honestly. I feel like that's a fairly cheesy answer, but it's just the one that like is, I'm looking at this list and it's like me, this one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because that song is beautiful anywhere. I mean, it makes me fucking cry when I hear that. And it's a Bill Evans composition. It's a weird history with that song because it was originally a Bill Evans composition called Peace, Peace.
Okay.
Peace like serenity, peace like composition, peace. Okay. That he included on one of his first records, Everybody Digs Bill Evans. And then Miles Davis liked it so much that he was like, we're going to put that on Kind of Blue. And we're going to flesh it out and make it a new composition. And they like wrote some other changes to it. In the original version, it's just that one chord progression over and over and over again, and he just kind of does variations on it. But like, it's just that there's no more like beautiful like New Yorky moment to me than like sitting in like Brooklyn Bridge Park and looking at the Manhattan skyline like during sunset and like listening to Flamenco Sketches like that would just devastate me like every time like in the most self-indulgent cheesy like you know, if you put that in a movie it would be criticized for being
like too spot on.
Yeah like it would be too obvious, but if you do it in real life in private you'll cry. Like if you're sitting in Brooklyn Bridge Park at sunset looking at Lower Manhattan listening to Flamenco Sketches and you don't cry, go the fuck back to Wisconsin. Okay? I'm saying it here for now. You don't belong here.
I love it.
But I have a burning desire. I have to talk about the Roaches.
Oh yeah,
yes,
we were listening to that yesterday.
Go on.
Because
that's such a good song.
This is just a band that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I am evangelical about them. And I think relates interestingly to the New York folk scene, because the Roaches are a band. They're actually from New Jersey. It's these three sisters, Maggie, Terry, and Suzy, that started a folk trio. Paul Simon discovered them. They would have been discovered either way.
Sure.
But, and had them sing backup vocals on a couple tracks, and There Goes Rhyme and Simon. But then they got a record deal, and they made records for about 20 years. And they were a major part of the New York folk scene in the late 70s and 80s, which is a weird period. They were very, very regular at a club called Folk City, which I don't think exists anymore. They wrote a song about Folk City called Face Down at Folk City, which is a really funny song. And their music is amazing. It's their harmonies are just breathtaking, but also their witticisms are incredible. They are simultaneously the funniest and the saddest band of all time. They have like this incredible sense of humor, and they have these songs that have this childlike, it's almost like a cynical toddler. It's hard to describe. But then they also have these songs of just like pure, unself-conscious, like bare heartbreak that just like lay bare this deep, resigned, emotional mourning that it can just break you into. And so this song actually perfectly kind of encapsulates both of those feelings. And I was really pleased with myself when I selected this song called "The Train," which is about the experience of being a commuter on a commuter train into New York City. And the song is really funny. It has these really funny lyrics about being afraid of the guy who's sitting next to you.
Right.
And he's drinking 2 beers and reading the New York Post. But it's also like, it comes across very clearly in the song that like this person is longing for something, and it's not specified really what it is, but that there's a melancholy, there's a mysterious kind of melancholy to the song that like if you look at it through that prism can really, really cut you emotionally. And
well, the inability to puncture that barrier in New York City, which like can be a curse and also a blessing at the same time. Like, when do you want that barrier up? When do you want it down?
It's like the incredible loneliness of being in the middle of a crowd. You know, that's sort of, which is such
a New York feeling,
universal New York experience. Everybody knows what it's like to be like surrounded by people on all sides and feel totally alone.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And that song, I feel like, as well as any song, just captures that feeling. But in general, I just need to make like a public pitch for everyone to listen to the Roaches, because they are one of the great. They never really had any breakthrough success, and like it's like a tragedy that they're not like the most celebrated singer-songwriters of their generation.
I was so glad that you put that on there, because there's one song of theirs that I think is on the same album. It's the Hammond song. Which I have like also on another playlist. It must have just like shown up, and I was like, I like this. This is beautiful. And so I hear that song all the time, and I was like, I recognize this voice. Like, what is this? And then, so now I'm gonna listen to the whole thing. I've never even listened to the whole thing.
Listen to that.
So,
that's off their first
album.
I highly recommend you listen to that album and an album called Speak, and an album, if you can find it, because it's like not on any stream. I happen to have it because I had a DVD of it, or a CD that I ripped onto my computer when I was like a teenager, and it's still on my iTunes from then. But I think you'd have to like buy it off of eBay. Called A Dove, which is just like the most beautiful record ever. They also were on an episode of Tiny Toons.
Oh, really?
Fun fact.
That's hilarious.
Yes, as cartoon Roaches.
Nice.
Somebody in the writing staff at Tiny Toons was a fan.
Nice.
But that's also a very New York song for me, because the way that I know about the Roaches is that my dad and my mom were big fans
Oh.
of theirs, and we'd go to see them live in the 80s. And so my sister and I listened to the Roaches constantly as
Right.
children
Oh.
in the car. So like, it's layers upon layers of like New York
Right.
impression for
Yeah.
me when I hear that.
So I think we could probably do another hour and a half just about your musical background. But I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about very, very briefly, because also I'm starting to get worried about our battery.
Sure.
Tell us about the new
Yeah.
album for your band that's in
Yeah.
process.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I'm in a band called Sooner. I am the drummer. I formed the band with my guitarist, whose name is John Ferris. We went to college together. We have an incredible singer named Federica and a wonderful bass player named Andrew. We've been playing for a couple of years in and around New York. It's alternative rock, shoegaze. I always like stutter and stuff. I'm like, what kind of music do we play? I never know how to describe it. Dream pop
Sure.
was the word that I was looking for.
I'd say like Cranberries and My Bloody Valentine
Yeah.
smashed together.
Yep.
If that sounds right to you.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I always try to decide whether or not to compare us to the Cranberries because it sounds like self-aggrandizing. I'm like, yeah, we sound like the Cranberries.
Yeah, but but it's true though,
Yeah.
and it's like the first thing that I think a lot of
I
people
hope
would
so.
say when they hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a new album that we recorded a month and a half ago, something like that, 2 months ago. We've been working on this album for quite a while. We were supposed to record it in April. That didn't happen
Right.
because the world ended.
Right.
Yeah, we are really excited. We've worked really hard on it. It's a great collection of songs. And we're in the process of mixing it right now. It should be out pretty soon. I would say early 2021.
Does it have a title yet or no?
We have not titled
Okay.
the album yet. I've definitely got some titles that I'm pushing for that will get absolutely vetoed. But it is our first long play album. We
Nice.
have released 2 EPs and a single. This will be our first full-length album.
Amazing.
And
That's
Sooner,
such a big
spell it out
deal.
for folks.
Sooner.
Yeah.
Our Instagram is Sooner Music,
Nice.
I think. Is it Sooner Music or it's
think it's
changed
Sooner
a
the
couple
band.
times. It might be actually now. Hold on. Sooner Sounds.
Oh.
None of those.
Sooner Sounds.
Yeah,
Sooner
it is Sooner
Sounds.
Sounds, no space. Sooner Sounds on Instagram, and you can get links to all of our music there.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, man.
of
Really
course.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great to have you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, that's our episode for this week. Thanks again so much to Tom for coming out and having a chat with us. We really enjoyed it. Next week, we are in Manhattan once again for a tour of Seinfeld sites.
Yeah.
And we'll have
Another theme,
yeah,
crazy theme. I'm really excited.
yeah.
We're going to be watching a lot of Seinfeld to prepare for that.
That's right. We got to bone up real quick. So we hope you join us for that week. If you haven't, please like, please subscribe, please share with folks. We love doing this. We want to get it out to as many people as possible.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.